Volodymyr Zelenskyy is facing a new kind of pressure, but this time it's not from the war in Ukraine, but from his own people. Mass anti-government protests have broken out across Ukraine. This is after Zelenskyy signed a bill that critics say weakens the independence of Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies. The president has since backtracked on the bill, but is that enough to improve public opinion of their wartime leader? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, Ukrainian public trust in President Zelenskyy has declined following his attempt to place anti-corruption agencies under government control, although he reversed the bill after pressure from European allies and the public. That move shook democratic confidence amongst Ukrainians. So can Zelenskyy recover from this public image setback? And what does the future now hold for the Ukrainian leader?
Crowds chanting, "The people are the power," fill the streets of Ukraine. This is a rare sight in a nation still at war.
Everyone, the pro-government faction, the former regent's party, the opposition, they all united around the idea of ruining our independence. This was a shock for me, how much demand had built up to destroy us.
Thousands came out to defend their democracy after Parliament passed a law placing two key anti-corruption agencies under government control.
Our citizens gathered outside the Verkhovna Radna because a vote is taking place on the independence of anti-corruption institution. They came to show our MPs that we are watching, so they don't repeat past mistakes. It's very important that all anti-corruption bodies remain independent, not pocket institutions, and free from political pressure.
President Zelenskyy initially defended the law, saying it was necessary to protect these agencies from Russian infiltration. But the move sparked swift backlash at home and concern from EU leaders worried about the impact on democratic reforms. Under mounting pressure, Zelenskyy reversed course and called on lawmakers to restore the agency's independence.
It is very important that the state listens to public opinion and hears its citizens. Ukraine is a democracy, absolutely no doubt.
Still, a recent poll shows Zelenskyy's approval rating has dipped since the controversy, with many citing frustration over domestic politics and the exhausting toll of a war now well into its third year. Now, as Ukraine faces both war and political challenges, can Zelenskyy rebuild trust and uphold the democratic values his people demand?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us all from Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, we have Ganza. Denis is CEO at CFC Big Ideas. That's a communications consultancy company, and he's a former youth delegate to the United Nations. We have Iryna Matviyishyn. She is a journalist based in Kyiv, and Olena Halushka. Olena is board member at the Anti-Corruption Action Centre and co-founder of the International Centre for Ukrainian Victory. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Iryna, I'll come to you first. I want to ask all of you to give me your impression of how Volodymyr Zelenskyy is coping with the pressure of war.
Well, I think it's a very multifaceted issue, because there's both a pressure of war in terms of the Russian threat and how Ukraine has to deal with it, with the rising threat of getting less weapons from the West, for example, and increasing Russian attacks, especially by drones on Ukrainian cities. Also, the situation at the front line and with the mobilization, of course. And on the other hand, as we've seen, there's a pressure from the society to continue the reforms and to hold to democratic values despite the security situation. And this is something that is even more challenging for the president in terms of how he handles internal politics and who is in power, actually. Because as you might have seen, we have a lot of issues currently with who is appointed at certain positions and how the government takes decisions and how effective it is in general.
Thanks, Iryna. Olena, to you, how do you think Zelensky is doing with the pressure?
I actually fully agree with what Iryna said, and I would say that probably like any other Ukrainian, he feels exhausted, he feels tired. I mean, we are in the fourth year of the full-scale war, but it's already the 12th year of the Russian aggression since it started in 2014. But we all understand what is at stake. And at stake is our sovereignty, at stake is our survival, and at stake is our future and existence. That is why we all understand that we need to go on, we need to continue, and not only defend on the front line, but also continue reforming and the democratic transformation of our country. Because this is not only about Ukraine, it is about our integration into the West, into European Union, NATO. That's the future that Ukrainians have chosen during the Revolution of Dignity, and that's the path towards which we are moving.
Thanks, Olena. Denis, to you. So Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies have always been independent, but Zelensky recently wanted to bring them under his control. Then we saw a lot of protests nationwide, and he backtracked on that idea. Just talk to me about the corruption in Ukraine and your view of it.
Personally, I never faced corruption in Ukraine. And that's coming also with many people, because yes, many people in Ukraine will say that Ukraine's biggest issue is corruption, of course, after the war. But when you ask the people, have you ever faced corruption in any kinds, in any institutions, less than 20% will reply yes. And at some point, I'm feeling that the issue is a bit over-exaggerated. And of course, as any country in the West, in the East, we have corruption cases. Even you in the United Kingdom, you have corruption cases. Sometimes you just call them lobbying. And, I'm not feeling that this is something which should prevent the West to stop supporting us. It's not the issue when it comes to military procurement. It's not the issue when we are speaking about some big decisions. Yes, we need to do our home tasks. We need to make sure that all the anti-corruption bodies are independent, that there is actually the rule of law. There is a lot of work to do. But remember that many people have accepted other European countries in the European Union without even the part of the reforms which we have already conducted in Ukraine. And this has been during the war, where every day Russia sends Shahed drones, missiles, and they're actually killing us. So I don't think it's like the biggest issue right now. The biggest issue is the war. We must be focused on that, not forgetting what is going on the internal agenda, and of course, proving that we are a real democracy. And I think that a month ago, several weeks ago, we have passed this test. We have shown the world that, yes, we have leadership, which is 6 years in power, but which is still able to at least listen people when they go out in the streets.
Thanks, Denis. Iryna, to you. So the war remains the number one priority, obviously. So do you think this corruption issue is just like a distraction almost?
I wouldn't say it's of course it's a distraction for people from the major issues they're facing, but at the same time, having been to these protests and having talked to people why they went out, I understood that freedom and security for Ukrainians go hand in hand with democracy and human rights. And they don't see the future of Ukraine as being just a safe country for everyone to live. They want to live in a democratic country with a potential and as part of the Western world. They don't want to be in some kind of Belarus, which is safe in terms of that rockets and drones don't hit their cities for now, but they want to live in a secure country that adheres to the principles of international law, that follows human rights, and where it's safe for people's freedom to be expressed. And that's what I saw in Kharkiv especially, where there was a danger for people to go out in this time, because at any moment a Russian missile or a drone can hit the city. But people were not afraid because they said, what is the purpose of fighting for this country if I don't live in a free and democratic country, even if it's safe?
Thanks, Iryna. Olena, to you, I want to talk about military procurement. Is that one area you think is ripe for corruption? Is it very tempting for people involved to start lining their pockets? Do you think that's been a concern of Zelensky's and he wants to root that out?
Well, of course, military procurements are an incredibly important area to watch. And let me explain to you why we have important safeguards in place. Because military procurements, by its nature, these are pretty kind of closed information. Of course, you won't be doing them publicly. I mean, since 2014, Ukraine moved all of the public procurement online into the auction system Prozorro, but you cannot be doing, auction openly the procurements of the weapons, of course. But that's why Ukraine managed to build the system of important safeguards. Because when we had first corruption-related scandals that regarded Ukrainian money in 2023, in the Ministry of Defense, they regarded the overpriced meals or overpriced clothing. We introduced a number of institutional changes. So from scratch, we built 2 new defense procurement institutions that were tasked with those procurements, both lethal and non-lethal. So that was the first important step to separate the procurements from the Ministry of Defense, like the policy-making authority. Then you are having in Ukraine investigative journalists who are doing amazing job. They are looking into all of the possible schemes, and they are doing watchdogging. You're having civil society that are also, on one hand, advocating for the defense reforms to make sure that we are introducing more accountability and transparency to the extent that it is possible during the martial law. On the other hand, pushing the overall defense-related reforms, because they were not, unfortunately, the priority for Ukrainian reform agenda between 2014 and 22. And then on top of that, you are having Ukrainian society, which shows a very strong hunger for justice. And the fact that Ukrainian society, by going to the cardboard protests, defended the independence of the anti-corruption institutions is also having implications on the fairness of the defense procurements, because NABU, SAPO, and Anti-Corruption Court, these are the institutions that are investigating possible abuse in this area. So I would say that having those instruments, tools of the checks and balances system, make us sure that we would be able to minimize any possible misuse of the funding that is allocated for the defense procurements, because obviously this is incredibly important in the protracted war, when we can depend less on the international aid and seek for more domestic and internal resources.
Thanks, Olena. Denis, to you, I read this week that Zelensky's trust rating amongst Ukrainians is down to 58%. Every world leader would love to have a trust rating of 58%, wouldn't they?
For sure, because you need to understand one thing. We will support our leadership, the leadership of the country, until the war is over. That's our first priority. We do understand that the possibility of having elections, when you have an active front line, when you have rockets being sent to the major cities nearly every day, it's not possible. And thus, of course, we have no other choice but to support the leadership. And I'm not speaking only about Zelensky. I'm speaking about, of course, the local leaders, the military leadership. Yes, there is a small trust sometimes in the parliament. That's the old Ukrainian, tradition, not to trust the parliament for many, many years. But making sure that we are, as a country, are united and that we have the means to tackle the Russian aggression, because that's the biggest issue here. Because without Russia, we will not face so many issues. And I sometimes even assume when people are speaking about corruption, remember that Ukraine was occupied by Russia for hundreds of years. And all these corruption traditions, they are coming from the Soviet Union, and they're still in every single point introduced in Russia. And when you come to Russia, you will not do anything without paying a bribe. So it's just the question of time when we will totally beat corruption in our institutions, when we will have enough means to finally bring this war to an end. And it's important that you are supportive of us.
Thank you, Denis. Iryna, to you, I saw your president speak earlier this year at Davos in Switzerland. He is an extraordinary communicator. His message lands. He has really stepped up, hasn't he? I mean, when you think of leadership and politicians who can speak, bearing in mind English is not his first language, Zelensky is a brilliant orator.
Yes, he has a good speechwriter, and of course he has some background in this term, so we can say that he's not bad in terms of communication. But on the internal level, I would say that there are some issues on communicating certain issues in the Ukrainian society and being relevant, let's say that, as when we speak about mobilization, for example, or the same issue of the corruption scandal. This could have been communicated better, and that's what he admitted actually in his reaction to the protests against the crackdown on anti-corruption agencies. But also coming back to the issue of his rating, we've seen these polls in the recent months that his rating grew in Ukraine. But at the same time, there was news reported recently, right after these protests, that he could have sacrificed at least 5% of his support because of this anti-corruption crackdown. So, yeah, everything in Ukraine is very fluid, and people are still very into the check and balance. They want to hold their government accountable, even despite the war, despite everything that is happening, because the internal politics and decision making, especially when it comes to procurement, defense, and these issues with corruption, they are directly connected to our potential of survival.
Thanks,
and
Iryna.
That's why for Ukrainians it's crucial.
Thank you. Let's bring in Olena. I want to look at international relationships and how Zelensky has balanced friendships with the United Kingdom, France, Germany, the United States. He's done a very good job, hasn't he, in garnishing and gathering support for Ukraine?
Well, yes, of course. One of the very important pillars for this support is definitely trust. And that's why we are right now also communicating and explaining to the societies of our main Western partners that the protests that happened and people going out to the streets in order to defend the independency of the anti-corruption institutions, it is the manifestation of Ukraine's democracy. It is actually the proof and the sign how deeply democratic instincts are living inside Ukrainians, even despite a full-scale war. Because yes, we know very well that the leaders of our main Western partners, the countries that you mentioned, UK, Germany, France, US, they realize very well what is at stake. And they realize that if Ukraine fails, Russia won't stop. They will move further. They make it very clear. If you take a look at the Russian television, they are very explicitly planning how they will bomb the cities of European countries, European states. But it is still very important to rally the support not only in the political class, but among the societies. And I think what is very strong is that Ukraine is a democracy which is fighting and defending from a much larger authoritarian state, which tries to take us over and destroy. But in order to be able to maintain this trust, it's incredibly important that we avoid crisis like the one we had 2 weeks ago, because democracy, fight against corruption, our will and fight for justice, these are important strengths. It's not only about unity inside the society, but it's also about maintaining the global or at least transatlantic unity for Ukraine in this fight against Russian aggression.
Thanks, Olena. Denis, I want you to think back to that incident in the White House, that notorious press conference where he was pretty much savaged by President Trump. Zelensky has done really well to bounce back from that, hasn't he, in terms of the relationship with the Trump administration?
It's a really tough question because, of course, the decrease of the US support, which we faced, even remember that the US Congress was not voting for many months the Ukraine support back in 2023, 2024. And of course, we are feeling this on the front line. We are, sometimes losing lives when we are not receiving the crucial support. But, I think that Donald Trump's team, they just needed time to finally understand that Putin cannot be trusted. And this is the message which we were trying to push from many, media's official and unofficial channels, that you can't trust the team of Russia. You just can't talk to them normally because they will break any rules. And remember, even, I don't recall, it's maybe Otto von Bismarck who said it, that even any agreement signed with Russia is not even worth a paper it is signed on. And it's very important that we show the world that, yes, they are the invaders, that they are the ones who caused this war, they are the ones who are attacked. And we are hoping that this feeling will continue because, of course, Donald Trump is unpredictable sometimes. And we hope that the recent events that Witkov came to Moscow, it will not influence, and it is not a trap for Trump's administration to start believing Russia again. The only thing they can do to be trusted is actually stop the atrocities and stop fighting. And they are not doing this, as you can see.
Thank you, Denis. Iryna, to you, just looking ahead, Zelensky has been in power for, 6 years now? When the day comes that Ukraine is able to have another presidential election, how do you think he will do if he stands for power again?
Well, as we see, his rating is still high despite all the hurdle. So I guess as of now, he still has some chances. But to be honest, Ukrainian society is becoming more and more impatient. People are also getting tired of internal issues that are not so easy to solve. And plus, the war is ongoing. The mobilization is a very painful topic, and the government kind of failed the communication in that regard. So, of course, I think that I don't know when the war will end, but the rating is gradually falling. I would say that, at least there is a tendency in that sense. But it's hard to say what's to come because literally we don't see the end of this war as of now, and we don't know who will be the potential candidates for the elections after this war. Like maybe there will be some new figures popping up out of the civil society, out of the veteran community, and I think that will be more clear when we see what's happening after.
Thanks, Iryna. Olena, I just want to pick up on something Iryna said about Ukrainian people feeling tired and the fatigue. Just for our audience, paint me a picture of life in Ukraine these last few years. Just how tired are you feeling?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that this war touches literally everyone in Ukraine. I mean, all of us have either very close family members or very close friends who are on the front lines, who are defending Ukraine since the start of the full-scale war. And of course, we know very well how complicated the situation is there in the east, in the south, and how Russians are trying to push, how they are throwing their soldiers into the meat grinder in order to capture every square meter of the Ukrainian land to occupy it. But even in the rare, you can also feel the war very badly, unfortunately.
Final point to Denis, just briefly, Denis. The goal remains for Ukraine victory in the war and ultimately membership of the European Union and NATO.
Yeah, for sure. This is why we have started all of this many years ago, when people went to first a peaceful protest to Euromaidan. And this is what we are hoping for. And we are hoping that the chair is reserved for us. And you need to understand that the only country which can actually protect EU and NATO today is Ukraine.
Thank you, Denis, Iryna and Olena, all in Kyiv. Thank you so much. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.